Hello guys, welcome to BBC Highlights and News. Israel-Hamas War Live News. Global aid agencies demand Gaza ceasefire. South Africa said it will recall all its diplomats in Israel for consultation. Kumbudzo Ntshavheni, a minister in the president's office, told a press briefing that all diplomatic staff in Tel Aviv would be asked back to Pretoria for consultations. "We are extremely concerned at the continued killing of children and innocent civilians in the Palestinian territories, and we believe the nature of response by Israel has become one of collective punishment," Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor told a press conference. "We felt it important that we do signal the concern of South Africa, while continuing to call for a comprehensive cessation of hostilities." Earlier, Turkey, Jordan, Bolivia, Honduras, Colombia, Chile and Bahrain also did the same. Bolivia also cut all diplomatic ties with Israel following its atrocities in Gaza. EU's foreign policy chief Josep Borrell has suggested a plan under which Israel could suspend its military operation in Gaza in return for the Red Cross getting access to captives held by Hamas. "I think that a humanitarian pause counterbalanced by an access to hostages with the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, as a first step to their release is an initiative in which we should work," Borrell told EU diplomats in Brussels. "Call it a truce, window, whatever, but we need that violence recedes and that international humanitarian law is being respected." While there have been widespread calls for a ceasefire, Netanyahu has ruled out this option until all captives are released. Here is the latest on the situation in Gaza as reported by our colleagues on the ground. Israeli jets targeted 2 buildings in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, and 1 in Tal az-Zoutar in the north. At least 15 people were killed in those attacks. Israeli army said it has carried out 450 airstrikes on Gaza since last night. Palestinian Health Ministry says at least 200 Palestinians killed in the overnight airstrikes, adding that many are still buried under the rubble. In central Gaza, Israeli jets targeted 3 residential buildings, killing at least 45 people. Israeli attacks destroyed the only specialized mental health center in Gaza. The attacks also hit the 3rd floor of a pediatric hospital in Gaza City, which treats children with cancer. Al-Qassam brigades say its fighters are exchanging fire with Israeli troops at 3 different locations in Gaza. After Israel issued another evacuation warning, some people who managed to cross and reached the central area of the Gaza Strip from the north said Israeli soldiers arrested some of them. Footage shared by Palestinian activist Salah al-Jafarawi on Instagram shows intense shelling in different areas in Gaza last night and victims being brought to a hospital. The Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 200 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes overnight. The Gaza Strip has now been divided into 2 by the Israeli army. Slowly, the southern part of Gaza is turning into a large concentration camp with Israel ordering people to move from the north to the south and then stacking them there. This seems to be the new strategy. For people still stranded in the northern part, it also seems to be very difficult for them to evacuate. Dar Hussam Abu Safia, director of the Children's Hospital at the Kamal Adwan Medical Complex in the northern Gaza Strip, says that the hospital has been receiving at least 30 bodies and about 200 wounded patients daily. He told Al Jazeera that children constitute 70% of the victims of the Israeli bombing, including shrapnel wounds and bodies with heads blown off. Abu Safia stressed that children will need psychological care after the end of the war, especially those who have lost their families. France will send dozens of armored vehicles to the Lebanese army so it can properly carry out patrol missions in the country, the country's defense minister Sébastien Lecornu said. Tensions are mounting on the Israel-Lebanon border due to the ongoing fighting between the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah and Israeli army. Speaking to Lebanon's L'Orient Le Jour newspaper, Lecornu added it was vital to beef up the Lebanese National Army so that it could coordinate well with the UN peacekeeping force. The European Union will increase humanitarian aid to Gaza by €25 million, $26.9 million, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said. By doing so, the European Union would spend a total of €100 million in humanitarian aid for the civilians in Gaza, von der Leyen said in a speech in Brussels. Following Hamas's attack on Israel last month, the EU said it was putting all €691 million, $728 million, of development aid to Palestinians under review before reversing that decision due to the backlash and widespread criticism the decision received. Blinken has finished his meeting with his Turkish counterpart, Hakan Fidan. As of now, there has been no joint statement, but we've been informed that they discussed several issues, particularly the war in Gaza and an exchange of prisoners between Hamas and Israel. The U.S. side tried to convince Turkish officials to put more pressure on Hamas and make it release the captives. But the Turkish position was very clear on this matter. They said that the prisoner release should be mutual, where Hamas releases captives and Israel releases Palestinian prisoners. Turkey also asked for an unconditional ceasefire and said there should be an international mechanism to observe the ceasefire, which Ankara would be the guarantor for. But we haven't heard anything about a ceasefire from Blinken. He has been using the phrase humanitarian pause, and the Turkish side has told him that this is not enough. Dozens of protesters gathered in front of Turkey's foreign ministry, where the country's FM Hakan Fidan and U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken were holding talks. The protesters accused the U.S. of complicity in the deaths of Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Earlier, police dispersed a group of students who marched toward the ministry chanting "Murderer Blinken, get out of Turkey." It was the second day of protests denouncing Blinken's visit to Turkey. On Sunday, police fired tear gas and a water cannon as thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters tried to enter an airbase used by U.S. troops in southern Turkey. Several hundred protesters also marched to the U.S. Embassy in Ankara. NATO member Turkey recalled its ambassador to Israel as anger rises over the civilian deaths in Gaza. President Erdogan was quoted as saying that he could no longer speak to Netanyahu. We can now bring you some updates from the Salama Maruf, the head of the government media office in Gaza. Israel is falsely claiming that it is not targeting civilians. It is starving the civilians and targeting them with its airstrikes. We have received dozens of reports about dead bodies on different streets in Gaza and around hospitals' perimeters. We do not trust Israel's assurances about transferring the injured and need the ambulances to be escorted by cars from the Red Cross. Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 200 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes on Gaza overnight. In a statement, the ministry added that the death toll only covered Gaza City and the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Palestinian PM Mohammed Shtayyeh's weekly cabinet meeting has just finished, and we can bring you key talking points from there. Scenes in Gaza are beyond human endurance. Children are being killed by bombs, hunger and fear, wounded without access to medical care, and ambulances are being bombed live. Gaza needs electricity and water. Gaza is under the rubble and needs the aggression to stop to search for survivors under the rubble. People of conscience and advocates of human values are required to move quickly to stop the aggression that has turned Gaza into a valley of blood. Israeli Minister Kayla Eiland said they must create a humanitarian crisis in Gaza so that it becomes uninhabitable for human life. The Israeli Minister of Heritage was not satisfied with 10,000 people killed, more than 24,000 wounded, and 1 million displaced. He wants to see Hiroshima in Gaza, to see genocide accomplished with the nuclear bombs Israel possesses. The International Criminal Court must issue an arrest warrant against criminals as a precautionary step in order to stop the killing machine. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel to see more.